It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
All right, Brian. So now let's talk about sort of the next generation. The next generation. This is the 50 years old and beyond, right? And we're going to call these the empty nesters, the folks that are moving into likely moving into a different stage of life. Should they look at housing differently than their younger counterparts?
I'm already going to just annoy people. Is that because I'm going to start off with a bang and tell you at this point, as you're approaching retirement, and this is, I want you to be debt free.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I think that that is so hard for me to hear because the interest rates are so low. Why would I do this? Because guys, it's not all about the mathematical calculation. There's also risk elements. There's other things. You need to own your life as you approach financial independence. The last thing that you need to have at financial independence is encumbrances. And that's when you have debt, you are not independent. You are encumbered to the debt that sits over your life. So I do want you at this point, if you're 50s and beyond, meaning 50s and 60s and 70s, I want you to own your life completely.
Now, what I think is when I see people in their 50s and 60s and 70s, I generally see when it comes to housing decisions, they go one of two ways, I think, right? Either this is the stage where they flex. They go ahead and do the dream home that they've always wanted to do, where they could do all the things I always want to do, or they downsize. And they decide, you know what, I don't need the big house, I don't need all the square footage, don't need the acreage. And I don't think that either one of those are inherently right or wrong. But before you do either one, you kind of have to answer some questions to know that you're navigating the right way.
Yeah, you definitely should go through a planning exercise and answer these basic questions. Know your why. I mean, because why are we buying a bigger house if we don't like having people here? Know your where, because, I mean, you might be changing. I mean, look, you got the kids out of the house. You know, maybe, look, whenever I go out and I've played golf in Arizona and other places, I always see these retirement communities, and I'm like, wow, this is great out here. The climate's awesome. The housing's somewhat affordable. I can see why people are kind of moving over here, and this is going to be their retirement, is playing golf and having this house right here on the golf course. So your where might be changing, and then know your what. I mean, what's even going on? What do you need this house to do for you? You know, and what's going to be going on for you? Are you going to be traveling? Are there any hobbies that this will impact? You know, do you need land because you're pulling the RV into the garage, you know, the shed that you have? So all that stuff is going to come into play that maybe downsizing makes sense because the house to raise the kids is no longer what is the center part of the reason you even had that house.
And think about there things that could change in your life that might affect your housing decision. One thing you might not want to do is in your 50s, do the flex and build the beautiful house that you've always built and you have all these visions. And then all of a sudden the kids have now gotten into adulthood and they're starting to have babies. And they moved to another part of the country. And now this vision that you had, you think, I don't want to be here. I want to go be with my grandbabies. I want to go somewhere else. Make sure you understand that whether you are flexing or downsizing, you know where you actually want to be spending your time. And the housing decision you make coordinates with that decision.
So that leads to, because we've seen people who've flexed in a good way, meaning that they have kids and grandkids around. And yes, they built a big house, but they also are the landing pad for all of the baby birds to come back for all the holidays, whether they're hosting Bible studies or hosting, you know, events there. They're doing all kind of community functions there. The why on that makes sense. You know, so I'm just saying do the exercise. It doesn't mean one's right versus the other. It just means that you actually took the steps to know, does this fit the lifestyle I'm building as I'm approaching or at financial independence?
So now there is a second. So some folks decide, okay, do I want to downsize? Do I want to flex? And then some folks say, hey, you know what? I like my current house. I don't want it to go into it. I'm going to stay with this house. Now it's that time I want to go buy the second home, or I want to get the condo down on the beach, or I want the place up in the mountains. That's another thing that I see people navigate at this stage. And I would imagine there's some things we probably ought to think through even before we make that decision, even at this stage in life.
So yeah, let's close this out by talking about second homes, vacation properties. This actually could play in multiple ways. You could now be wanting to build rental property portfolios, or it could be that you want to have a secondary vacation home. Either way, we want to give you some guidelines on this. First of all, especially if it's going to be a use asset, I want you to minimize debt as much as possible. Even if it's rental property, I want you to figure out a way that you can do this as least leveraged as possible, because the last thing I want you to do is have financial independence, but yet you're out there building this levered portfolio that could derail you after you've already won the game.
Yeah, I want to make sure that I reiterate what you just said. This would not be advice that you would give. Hey, you build your whole entire life building up this financial abundance, and then you get to retirement in your 60s, and you finally paid off your house, and you're finally debt-free, and now you go get a big stinking mortgage on the beach, and you start it all over again. If you're looking at making sound financial decisions to have a stress-free financial independence period, you probably don't want to go rack up a whole bunch more debt.
This one kind of points back to what we've created, is that I think you don't need to consider a second home or even rental property unless you've reached steps 8 or 9 of the financial order of operations.
That's great.
Remember, you want to make it through all the basic steps 1 through 7. That means that we're going to have emergency reserves. We're going to be saving everything we need to for retirement. We're saving 25% of our gross income. All of those goals and objectives have been accomplished. This is kind of the cherry on top of the sundae, that you've done the basics first. Don't start off, because I imagine there's going to be some 30-somethings that are going to be watching this segment just to see aspirationally what they should be doing. If you're thinking about buying vacation property while you haven't even maxed out your Roth IRA, you're doing it all wrong. Make sure you respect the FOO. This is steps 8 and 9.
And the other thing, when it comes to second homes, whether it's rental properties or personal use properties, consider the extra costs or labor for the upkeep. Not only do you have another asset that you have to purchase, but now you have to furnish it. And if it's a rental property, you have to pay a maintenance company. You have to keep the utilities on. And there are all sorts of extra costs that come along with it that aren't just strictly the cost of ownership. So make sure when you're doing your financial plan that you factor in not just the cost of the structure itself, but all the stuff that goes along with it.
Yeah, and I can add to that, because a lot of times, especially if you're thinking about second home you might rent to help offset the cost of this, management companies are going to take a good portion of that. Another thing, because I owned a beach condo for a little bit, I was shocked to find out, salt water destroys everything. I'm just going to straight up tell you, it takes out all your light fixtures, it takes out all of your outdoor furniture, and if your heat and air system, probably going to replace it a lot more frequently, because that salt air is just eating it alive. That was kind of a big shock and awe for me. So just make sure you not only factor in the purchase price, as Bo talked about, but what are the ongoing costs, those management fees, the HOA dues, as well as what just maybe there's unique things like the detrimental impacts of salt air that has on just being in this beautiful paradise that you're building for yourself.
And then the last thing as it relates to second homes, anytime a client or a potential client is talking to us about buying a vacation home, buying a second property, we always come back to know your why. What is your why? Because we want to remind them that from a financial standpoint, really, really nice vacations are often a lot less expensive than second homes. And not only that, if you're going on really nice vacations, you can go to different places. If you buy that second home, that vacation house, that beach house, that mountain house, odds are every time you leave to go somewhere, rather than going to see all the other parts of the country or all the other parts of the world, you're going to feel like you have to go to that place. So know your why before you buy it to make sure it is something you actually want to own and not just something you want to experience and rent a house for a week or a month or a couple months and then be able to go back to not having to be the homeowner.
Yeah, this is definitely, make sure you understand all the different aspects of it. I usually come pretty hard at second homes because I had not a great experience, but I had enough clients who have had good experience with it that I think it's okay as long as you've done all the homework.
That's right.
It is definitely one of those things. Don't get yourself over leveraged right after you've won the game. Make sure you understand what you're getting into, and just definitely plan. Don't neglect any part of this, because just your money and everything you've built your entire life is too important to let some emotional decision that you got really excited about in your mind, the brochure moment of how awesome this is going to be, led you down a path that's not as great as it seemed on paper.
If you've not had a chance to check it out yet, go to our website. You can go to moneyguy.com/resources. We have tons of content, tons of resources out there available for you. So if you are navigating this decision of buying real estate or figuring out what your next step is, and you want to say, man, am I on the right track? Go download our free deliverable. You can go get the financial order of operations deliverable at moneyguy.com/resources, along with a whole plethora of other assets that you can use to help you take your finances to the next level.
Guys, thanks so much. Channel's been growing rapidly. We're picking up listeners both on podcasting, YouTube. We're picking up clients all around the country because of the abundance cycle where we love on you. You come, learn, apply, grow, reach a level of success. You're going to remember who planted the seeds. We could not thank you just enough with how much you have blessed us with. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hansen. Money Guy team, out.